Good morning. This is the lecture number 8. I am Professor Kazakh National Academy of Arts, Timur Bershurgenov, and my author's course devoted to the methods and tools of critical thinking. This is the lectures for master students. And today I'm going to tell you about critical realism theories and methods. Let me start to present my presentation. Share my presentation. Okay, this is nice. Critical realism. And what kind of definitions do you know about critical realism? This here range of questions and definitions about critical realism, here research methods, and this is the definition Baska's critique of positivism. Humans capable of knowing and measuring reality. Reality remains independent of mind. Human perception of reality is equated with reality itself. Also, you can find reality is independent of the mind. In the literature of Europe and Russia, you can also find human perception reality is equated to the reality itself. Emergence is a major contributor and predictable of outcomes, etc. Anyway, critical realism. What is the critical realism? Critical realism is a philosophy that grew out of philosopher Roy Baska's critique of positivism, especially specifically the assumption that humans are capable of fully and infallibly knowing and measuring reality. This is instead, critical realism argues that the evidence we observe may be close to reality, but is always fallible, socially and subjectively biased description of reality. Критический реализм – это философия, выросшая из критики позитивизма философом Рой Баскером, в частности, из предположения, что люди способны полностью и безошибочно знать и измерять реальность. Вместо этого критический реализм утверждает, что свидетельства, которые мы наблюдаем, могут быть близки к реальности, но не всегда являются ошибочным, социальным и субъективным описанием реальности. Тем не менее, в отличие от конструктивизма, критический реализм также бросает вызов допущению, согласно которому человеческое восприятие реальности приравнивается к самой реальности. However, unlike constructivism, critical realism also challenges the assumption that human perceptions of reality are equated with reality itself. Instead, critical realism argues that reality is independent of the mind. While human perspectives are important, these are always reports of reality. For example, a smoker may believe that smoking tobacco does not harm his lungs, but the objective biological state of his lungs is not determined by the person's beliefs. Reality remains independent of mind. Вместе этого критический реализм утверждает, что реальность не зависит от разума. Здесь некоторые книги, которые можно параллельно обращать на них внимание. Вместе этого критический реализм утверждает, что реальность не зависит от разума. Хотя человеческая точка зрения важна, это всегда отчеты о реальности. Например, курильщик может полагать, что курение табака не вредит его легким, но объективное биологическое состояние его легких не определяется убеждениями человека. Реальность остается независимой от разума. То есть вот такая картина. Critical realism also argues that the mind-independent nature of reality applies not only to physical dimensions, such as chair beneath you or to car moving toward you, but also to social and cultural aspects. The mind-independent nature of culture means that human perceptions of cultures remain mind-independent and cannot be identified with the cultural themselves. This refers to the fact that people can believe that people can have beliefs and personal understanding. That is also does not change the state of this mind-independent reality. Критический реализм также утверждает, что независимая от разума природа реальности применима не только физическим измерениям, таким как стул под вами или машина, движущая вами, но также к социальным и культурным аспектам. Независимо от разума, природа, культура означает, что человеческое восприятие культуры остается таковым и не может быть отождествлено с самими культурами. Это относится к тому, что люди могут иметь убеждения и личное понимание, но это также не меняет состояние этой независимой реальности. Okay, critical realism can be used for research methods to explain outcomes and events in natural settings, which addresses questions about how and why events or phenomena occur. From this approach, critical realism recognizes that interventions and systems are made up of emergent mechanisms that can explain outcomes. Emergence describes the synergies that occur between the components of complexes, complex process such that the outcome is more than the sum of the parts, and that different components can combine at multiple levels of the system. Критический реализм можно использовать для методов исследования, чтобы объяснить результаты и события в естественных условиях. Что касается вопросов о том, как и почему происходят события и явления. Исходя из этого подхода, критический реализм признает, что вмешательство системы состоят из возникающих механизмов, которые могут объяснить результаты. Возникновение описывает синергизм, который возникает между компонентами сложного процесса, так как результат больше, чем сумма частей, и что различные компоненты могут объединяться на нескольких уровнях системы. Здесь мы можем говорить, эмерджентность вносит большой вклад в непредсказуемость результатов в сложной системе. Emergence contributes greatly to the unpredictability of outcomes in a complex system. These features of critical realism align well with the ontology of the complexity that recognizes the synergetic nature of context and mechanisms. This understanding aligns with the complexities of primary care, where we work with patients with multiple interrelated interrelated conditions, living in communities that influence outcomes. A critical realist uh, mm, approach can help us answer research questions about how and why interventions and programs work in complex primary care settings. Here we can find different movies, for example, Authors, Authority Without Names, Life of Others. It's according to metamodernistic concept. Also, Kazakh films. Okay. Anyway, critical realism is a philosophy that grew out of philosopher Roy Basker's critiques of positivism, specifically the assumption that the humans are capable to fully and accurately knowing and measuring reality. Yeah. Критический реализм – это философия, значит, в частности, из предположения, что люди способны полностью безошибочно знать и измерять реальности, философии, выросшей из критики позитивизма философом Роем Баскером. Instead, critical realism argues that the evidence we observe may be close to reality, but is always a flawed social and subjective description of reality. However, unlike constructivism, critical realism also challenged the assumption that human perception of reality is equated with reality itself. Instead, critical realism argues that reality is independent of the mind, while the human perspective is important. There's always reports of reality. Yeah. Here, some questions. Who is the representative of critical realism? In the 20s and 40s of the 19th century, critical realism was formed in the literature of Europe and Russia. This is according to the history of critical realism. Yeah? Stendhal, Balzac, and Mérimée in French literature, Dickinson, Thackeray in the English, Pushkin, Lermontov and Gogol in Russian, Heine in German, were its earliest representatives. Yeah. What is the sense of the movement of critical realism in literature? In generally accepted that critical realism reveals the conditionality of the circumstance of a person's life and his psychology established by the social environment, according novels by Honoré de Balzac, George Eliot. In Soviet times, the materialist aesthetics, Belinsky, Chernyshevsky, Dobrolyubov, were used to substantiate critical realism in Russia. Critical realism in 19th century, early 20th century. You can find here on the screen how critical realism is a truthful objective impact on his historical development. Human character is revealed in organic connection with social circumstances, close attention to the inner world of person, and constitution of the tradition of Russian literature in the 19th century with a critical understanding of that is happening. And please find out here critical realism in Russian, and critical realism is a truthful objective impact on its historical development, constitution of the tradition of Russian literature 19th century with a critical understanding of what is happening, human character revealed in the organic connection, close attention in the world of the person. Yeah, we just mentioned about it. This is in critical realism in Germany at the end of the 19th, Beher, Drisch, Wenzel, which is formed in theological interpretation of modern scientists. This is the this is the critical realism about truthful objective impact on its historical development. Critical realism in literature, Russian literature, in the creative work of Google, critical principles, critical principles, or kind of critical principles of critical realism. Critical realism portrays the relationship between man and the environment in a new way. Human character is revealed in organic connection with social circumstances. The subject of deep social analysis became the inner world of man. Critical realism, therefore, simultaneously becomes the psychological. And critical realism in the painting of Russians painting 19th and early 20th century here. Artists Kramskoy, Massaed, Perov, how they conceive the critical realism in a human character is revealed in organic connection with social circumstances and continuation of the traditional Russian literature in the 19th century is a critical understanding of what is happening. Yeah, and their community was called named передвижники. Yeah, they did very active in the development of critical mind early 20th century. And also we can find hero Dume, the truth heroes Dume. The central theme of his work were his contemporaries, ordinary people, workers, minor employees, artisans, launderers. His works, you have to be a man of your time, reflect the general direction of the critical realism. The critical realism also, yeah, in Goncharov, Ostrovsky, and Turgenev's work. How about in cinema of realism? Bazin distinguishes between directors who put fights in the image and those who put fights in reality. He believed in objectivity in reality, like in documentary film. Critical realism in theater. In the 30s of the 19th century, critical realism became the dominant direction in the dominant direction the theater. This direction develops of the basis of the dramaturgy of Gogol and Ostrovsky and later Chekhov, Ibsen, Shaw. The theater becomes deeply national and democratizing, and mass popular form develops, and theater design for the common people image. Bolivar, Paris, small New York, and suburban theaters in Vienna at the time. Okay, how it turns into metamodernism, critical realism. Okay, this is an interesting thesis you can use in your research work, also in your understanding of the background regarding metamodernism. Metamodernity is fundamentally not elitist. He freely takes from that belongs to everyone from the mass collective primordial, leaving aside the old type of intellectualism. Метамодернизм принципиально не элитарен. Он свободен берет из того, что принадлежит всем, из массового, коллективного, изначального, оставляя в стороне старый тип интеллектуализма. То есть он игнорирует элиту. Нет такого. Все равны. Metamodern art is understandable to everyone, but it is semantically more voluminous than any art before it. Искусство метамодерна понятно всем, но смыслово объемное более, чем какое-либо искусство до него. Metamodern uses simple phrases that belong to all intonations, childishness and amateurism in their various manifestations. Метамодерн использует простые обороты, принадлежащие всем интонациям, детскость и дилетантизм в разных проявлениях. Working with that, with what has already been recycled and even this recycled a new vertical dimension, metamodernity seems to represent a new ecology of art, reproducing the waste recycling cycle. Работая уже с переработанным и сообщая этому переработанному новое вертикальное измерение, метамодерн как бы объявляет собой новую экологию искусства, воспроизводя цикл ресайклинга отходов. Metamodernizm does not need reference to specific personalities, to specific authors, to specific codes. He uses all this whenever he wants without quotation marks and footnotes. Метамодерну не нужны отсылки к конкретным личностям, конкретным авторам, конкретным цитатам. Он пользуется всем этим, когда захочет, без кавычек и сносок. Now, finally recommending some sources, references. This is the literature here, some part of in Russian. Влияние Рой Баскара, критического реализма на международные отношения. Рой Баскар, философ, чья школа критического реализма бросила вызов философии, энциклопедический словарь, Хилл, современная теория познания, Богомолов, Бурж, философия США в 20 веке, Бурж, философия канона и начало империализма, Rick Besant, American Philosophy, Wessel, Critical Realismus and Dialectische Materialismus, философский энциклопедический словарь, Пана, Clark, Liesel Davis, Complex Critical Realism, Tense and Application of Nursing Research, Basker and Realist Theory and of Science, Collier, Critical Realism, an Introduction to Roy Basker's Philosophy, Archer, Realist Social Theory, the Morphogenetic Approach. Thank you for your attending my lecture. I wish you fruitful work and evaluate the reality in an artistic way. See you next lecture. Goodbye.